Hello, welcome to the third and final part of my discussion/review of the anime series Ergo Proxy. Uh, this is going to be a pretty short section. Essentially, it's only going to be a wrap up. I'm going to present some pros and cons of the series and then discuss my final thoughts about it. Uh, Again, I find it kind of interesting that this has turned out so short. I figured it would be a little longer, knowing my tendency to kind of just go on and on and on and get carried away. I guess there just isn't too much to talk about in terms of Ergo Proxy. I mentioned it before in the previous sections, but this is a very straightforward series, compared to what I've discussed before. Um, and it's actually shorter, 2024 episodes. So I hope so far it's been enlightening or interesting at least. But here we've discussed the characters, discussed the themes, discussed the mythology, and now we're going to tackle more just a critical analysis of the show, what it did right, what it did wrong. So if you were interested in a review, this is probably the closest you'll get to it for me. Um, I think I've already said that I enjoy Ergo Proxy, and I wouldn't be doing a discussion of it if I didn't find it interesting or compelling. Uh, I think it does a lot more right than it does wrong, but it is not without its flaws, of course. I'll start with the pros. Ergo Proxy is, let me see. Well, it's animated well. Uh, Good soundtrack, a good opening theme by Monorail, whatever, however you pronounce that. I'm gonna get I'm sorry if I butchered it. Good music, good sound effects, good voice acting. Vince Vaughn is voiced by Liam O'Brien. Liam O'Brien does a good job. He tends, that guy tends, he tends to take on some unconventional roles when he voice acts. Real Mayer is voiced by Karen Thompson, I think. I don't know if that's her real name or if that's just the stage name, but she does a really good job. I forget who voices Pino. Does a good job too. Everybody just does a really good job. I don't have any real criticisms with the voice acting. It's well done across the board. Animation's good. There's some CG used, like when Vincent and them are on their little ship, the Rabbit, the ship that's powered by the wind. And there's some CG, and there's also some CG I think meshed in with, like, say, Ramdo when they're driving in the streets of Ramdo. That's meshed well. It goes well with the animation. Roxy's it's a dark show. A lot of dark, a lot of black, a lot of grays. You don't see a lot of color, and the color that you do see is typically very desaturated. So you get like reds. They're just like deep reds, crimson reds, not very bright. Uh, Also pros, I mentioned it before, but again, the show is not a bleak show. So it may come across as such in the presentation, but it's actually a very heartfelt, and its sensibilities are in the right place, and you get a lot of good character dynamics and development. I mentioned before that Vincent, Riel, Pino, they go through a lot of good character development. We see it in Raul Creed, we see it in Daedalus, we see it even in Iggy, in these characters kind of going through their own conflicts, coming to terms with who they are. Um, And there, surprisingly enough, there are a lot of times when watching Ergo Proxy where you find yourself just smiling, or you find yourself endeared, charmed by the characters. There's one episode in particular where, and it comes to, well, hold on, maybe uh, pre- uh, preface this by saying, that my favorite episodes of the series are ironically the episodes where nothing really happens in terms of the overall narrative. They're you could argue almost that they're filler, but they're not. The first of these is the episode where Iggy kind of betrays Riel, and it attempts to kill Vincent. When Iggy kind of he's infected by the Cogito virus, and he wants to just kind of take Riel back to Rondo, protect her or whatever. This episode, again, there's no real movement. The characters don't do anything. They literally stay in the same place that they were in from the previous episode. But the episode is so good. It's Iggy. It's about Iggy, and you get this character who was just a robot, just one dimensional, and suddenly there's like a whole other side of him comes out. And the show does a very good job portraying this, and not only does Iggy get development, but so does Riel. Riel realizes maybe the suffering that he was going through now that he was self-aware, the pain, the way that she had mistreated him, abused him in the past. Kind of just considered him a robot, just a tool for her to use. So that's one of my favorite episodes. My Another favorite of mine is the episode when Vincent, Riel, and Pino are stranded. Their ship is powered by winds, and there's no wind, so they basically stop traveling for days. We don't really have we don't really have an explicit time frame for how long they're stranded, but they're stranded for a long time, for days on end. And again, nothing happens in the episode. There's no plot, but it's just them there, and it's like their daily life, and it's so compelling. It's so charming to watch that episode. Like, that episode's particularly about Riel. Riel's observing the characters. So there's Vincent and Pino, and it's just funny. Like you really get to get under their skin, see them in a more intimate, personal way. They're eating the beans or going outside and messing around, just throwing snowballs at each other, or Riel starts to she can't make sense of like Vincent and Pino, and they're so quirky, and she doesn't understand it, and she gets angry at Vincent's habits, at Pino being a robot, and there's the scene where Pino kind of puts on Riel's eyeshadow and tries to when Vincent's waking up, and he looks at her and he's like, what the hell, it's like, Vincent. So it's a very endearing episode, and again, nothing happens plot-wise. There's no progression plot-wise, but we get a lot of good character development, and it really does a lot to make the audience care for the characters. I mean, by the end of that episode, like, you're charmed. You really are, not only by Pino, but also by Riel. Surprisingly enough, you feel for these characters. You like them, and you would think it's ironic in a show that can be so heavy-handed in terms of its philosophy and psychoanalysis. You would think that in a show like that, like, there wouldn't be any focus on the characters as people, but there is. And I have to give props to Ergo Proxy for that. So there are times when you think it's going to get really pretentious, and it doesn't. It scales back, it pulls itself back, it reins itself in, and it just has fun, which is strange for me saying Ergo Proxy fun, associating the two together. It seems strange. But then you have episodes like with the quiz show, with MCQ, and that's another example of the show just kind of going outside of its comfort zone and having fun. But then you have other episodes, like the episode, like the existential episode, where Vincent is talking to the librarian, who's actually like or the bookshop keeper, who's actually a part of his mind, and that whole episode is really heavy-handed. So it's kind of you have like this battle going on, almost like this balance. Ergo Proxy, on the one side you have the kind of fun, charming stuff, the show not taking itself so seriously, and then on the other hand, it's like the show taking itself really seriously, almost too seriously, and these are like in constant battle with each other. It's almost like Vincent Law versus Ergo Proxy, if I wanted to read into that more than really necessary. So, that Ergo Proxy has that going for it. It's a fun show, it really does, and it takes time to breathe. It's like for a long time you feel it's just kind of inhaling, and then finally it exhales, and you get some really nice, charming, endearing episodes out of that. Again, on the flip side, like I just said, the show can get too serious though, and it can get a little too hung up on itself. Excuse me. This is the problem that I really have with every show like this, and it's strange because this, on the one hand, I'm attracted to shows that are cerebral, that do try to make the audience think and try to tackle issues that are psychological or philosophical in nature. But the temptation with when you tackle issues like this is to get way too heavy-handed, to get way too carried away with it. And I get the feeling that it's like the creators of the show, much like maybe with the creators of Evangelion, they saw, hey, this is a cool theme, let's run with it, and they just kept running with it, and they almost sacrificed the storytelling for the sake of that. And again, that's a no-no in my book. You never sacrifice storytelling to try and get some almost virtually inane abstract message across, because honestly, if I wanted to know about philosophy, I would just read a book about philosophy. I would pick a philosopher like Rousseau or Descartes or whatever and read that, as opposed to watching an anime series. And that was one of my huge criticisms of Evangelion. If you saw my discussion about that, you should know how strong I feel about it. And Ergo Proxy Ergo Proxy is not safe from this temptation, and it does do it, and it suffers for it. Not on the level that Evangelion does. But not Razafon, Ergo Proxy, it does have this problem in some episodes. So that's a definite minus. Uh, that's really the only main criticism I can think of it. The only other real criticism is that the show is maybe paced a little awkwardly. Like I said, like there are episodes where almost nothing happens. And while these are good episodes, you could feel like maybe they could be meshed together. Things could be handled a little better. The show only has 24 episodes, and when you get to the end, you kind of think, wow, if you could have just gone like one more episode in here, or one or two more episodes in here, like it'd be a lot better. And there's one episode like when the trio is returning to Rondo, where they have a whole episode where it's like Vincent fights a proxy, and you think to yourself, was this episode really necessary, or could they have used this episode to contribute to the final arc of the show, right? And that's the question you kind of have. Again, it's like, is it really necessary for some of these episodes? Like, were some of these episodes, are they really beneficial to the show, or do they detract? And I think that's up to the individual members of the audience. If you watch the show, you kind of have to think for yourself, like, did I like this episode? Do I think it's worth it? Do I think it was worthy to be put in here and take up an episode slot? Because you have to be very careful when you have shows that are so short. And it's funny because you wouldn't think 2 episodes would make a difference, but it does. And a lot of the time when I watch anything, be it television, like live action television, or animated, or movies, and you have to really consider, like, is this product making the best use of its time, of its running time as it can? And that's a huge criticism, and I think people don't realize it all the time, but pacing is integral to a good product, a good story. And you could have the best story in the world, and if your pacing sucks, your story's done. Your product's done. It's not going to be worth anything. Pacing is essential. It is so vital to get right. You really need to get it right. And I think Ergo Proxy has some problems with its pacing. For the most part, it's okay, but it does have some problems. And I feel like if it had just had 1 or 2 more episodes, things would have been rounded out a lot better, filled out a lot better. But those are the only real cons I can think of. Is Ergo Proxy worth watching? Like I said in the beginning of the discussion, yes, I think so. If you're a fan of anime, if you're a fan of that type of anime, or that type of story that kind of goes in a more cerebral, philosophical direction as opposed to just pure action, there's a lot of good anime that does that. Evangelion, Razafon, Ergo Proxy. I think even there's a show that was interesting, Technowise. Haven't watched it or even really know much about it, but that sounds interesting, and maybe one day I'll watch that. But at least personally, that's what interests me. I know a lot of people who watch anime like to watch stuff like Bleach or Naruto or some of that weird stuff where the characters have strangely colored hair and big eyes, and they fight monsters, and it all just looks so damn generic. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of anime, but unless it's Guyver. God, I love Guyver. Okay. Anyway, I digress. So, I think Ergo Proxy is worth it if you're interested in that type of show. If you're not interested in that type of show, I would steer clear. It can get a little heavy-handed, a little tough to stomach. You might be watching the first few episodes and you don't really know what's going on, and it can be kind of frustrating. It gives you the answers, but you have to earn them, I guess. You have to sit through the show itself to get the answers that you want. And if you're not the type of person who likes to piece puzzles together, then I don't think you'll enjoy it. But it's a good show. Could be better. Could do some things better. But what can I say? It is what it is. So that said, that's my discussion / on Ergo Proxy. Yeah. To be honest, it feels kind of like I sort of phoned this one in. I really hope I didn't intend to. I really hope I didn't. If it feels that way, I apologize. I don't know. I guess my heart wasn't really in this discussion in doing it. I like the show though, and I did want to talk about it. There are things I wanted to talk about it, but it just feels there's just not a whole lot to talk about. It's not as deep as the others. But I think this turned out okay. So if you listen to it, I appreciate it. Thanks for that, and I hope it was worth listening to. So again, thanks, and I'll see you around.